I want to sidetrack here before we go back into some more culture stuff, but I forgot last week, Amber, I'm sorry I missed it, but last week we were talking about some of the rapture stuff, Steve, and she asked in Matthew 24:36, she says, it says, not even the Son knows the time. I'm surprised by this, and I'm wondering if you can explain further, talking about the rapture.
Right.
So, how come Jesus didn't know the time?
Okay, so when you, let me read the passage so everybody knows what we're talking about. Jesus said, talking about He's coming for believers, He said this, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. And he goes on with the passage. In another passage, Jesus specifically said that the angels don't know and the Son doesn't know either, and that's what she's referring to. It doesn't specifically say that in this passage. And so, obviously the question is, Jesus is God in human form, and so doesn't He know everything? Well, the deal with Jesus is, number one, He is God, but He's God in human form. And so when Jesus came to the earth, he really did the human thing. And so He's really acting as a human. And so many commentators will and scholars will look at that passage and just say, well, Jesus in this form on the planet at that time did not know the day or the hour. And so totally valid. And you see indications of that in other passages. There's a passage in John chapter 5 where Jesus is talking about the Father's work and how He does the Father's work. And He says, and the Father will show Him greater things than these, that you may marvel. Which lets you know that Jesus, He didn't come down with the plan. He came down and He is walking through life as a human, and the Father is revealing things to Him as time goes on. In other words, Jesus is learning, which is pretty wild.
Did you already say that when He grew in stature?
Yeah, that's the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Matt's referring to a passage in Luke where it talks about Jesus growing in wisdom and knowledge over time, and obviously that is an indication that Jesus was learning. And so you have the humanity issue there. The other thing that I think is way more cool is right after this, Jesus talks about the surprise coming to get believers. And then right after this, there are two parables. One is the parable of the two servants, and then one's the parable of the 10 virgins. And in the parable of the 10 virgins, Jesus introduces the Jewish wedding custom. And in the Jewish wedding custom, what you did was, if I wanted to get married to a girl, I was usually going to get married to a girl who was in my village, and so I would have grown up with her. But at some point I decided I want to marry that chick. And so I would go to my father, and because my father had to pay a price for my wife. And so there was a bride price. And so I would go to my father and I would talk to him about the bride price, and he determined what the cost was going to be. And then when that took place, I would go to the girl's house and we would have a dinner with her family. And at the dinner, I would be having a discussion with her father about what I'm going to pay for his daughter. And so, I'm going to...
Not awkward at all.
Yeah.
Normal conversation.
Yeah. Can you imagine the girl sitting there? And so the dad's sitting there going, I come up and I go, I love your daughter. I want to marry her. I'm willing to pay, 2 oxen and 3 sheep. And he's like, 2 oxen and 3 sheep? Have you looked at her? I want 4 oxen and 5 sheep. And we go back and forth and figure out what the price was going to be until we came to a decision. And then when we came to a decision, there was a cup of wine that was sitting in front of the girl. And if she drank from that, then that means the deal's on. And so now we have a contract, and I'm betrothed to her. That's a Jewish engagement, basically. So that's a deal. And if she doesn't drink from that, then I walk away dejected because I've been rejected by the girl.
Should have offered 3 oxen.
I know, man. There should have been more. Then I go back to my father's house, and I build a room addition on his house, and that's where the wedding night is going to be spent, in this room addition. It was called the bridal chamber. And the father is the one who inspects the bridal chamber. Otherwise, I always, whenever I talk about this at my church, I talk about, if any guy who wants to get married, if all he has to do is make some little bridal chamber on the outside of the house, he's going to take, go and get a piece of OSB, 4x8, nail it to it, to the side of the wall and go, done.
Yeah.
And off we go. We're going to have a camping style wedding. And, obviously the father wouldn't allow that. So in essence, the son never knew when he was going to go get his bride. It wasn't until the father said so. And then one day, the father would come out and go, and it was usually about a year afterwards, he would come out and go get your bride. And that's when the son would take off. He'd get all his friends together, and they'd go down the street, and they'd say the bridegroom comes, and the bride was supposed to be ready and waiting at that point, and then he'd come and snatch her away. Usually in the middle of the night is how they did this. And then they'd go back to the father's house, and they'd have a party. And usually it lasted for 7 days. And so in that context, that's what you have with the parable of the 10 virgins. It's a wedding feast that they're waiting for, and five of the girls are wise and 5 of the girls are foolish. They're all waiting for the bridegroom to come, and some of them don't get to go into the wedding feast because they are not prepared. And it is an illustration of the fact that Christ is coming back for his church, and we need to be ready and waiting, and we need to be prepared. And exactly the same thing. And so you put it in that context, and what you have is Jesus talking to the disciples. He goes, no man knows the day or the hour, not even the Son of Man. And then he goes into the Jewish wedding feast, and ding, the disciples' heads would go, oh, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about the Jewish wedding feast. He's talking about the fact that the son doesn't know until the father tells him to go get his bride. And that's what we have there. And so that's my favorite.
Yeah, that's a way better answer than, well, he's a human, but he probably knows now that he's at the right hand.
Right, yeah. And he does know right now that he's at the right hand of the Father.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Okay.